to beware of spoilers. I am Adam. I am on my way to work. I'm going to enjoy tonight's She-Hulk, I think, because we're finally getting Daredevil. A quick note before we really dive into Andor, because I feel like this needs to be said. So, if you listen to the show, you probably realize we have ads before the main content. I, nor do either of the other hosts on either this or 30-minute reviews, we do not pick the sponsors. Spreaker will randomly assign, or probably SEO assign, what gets put before an episode based on what we talk about, or based on tags that I put on, based on or just based on who's paying for the airtime. Now, we don't get a ton of money from it. We get like 0.3 of a cent from ads, which it's not a lot, but based on the number of listeners, it does cover the cost of the servers, like the cost of upkeep to keep the the podcast itself running. The reason I point this out is because I noticed an uptick in number of amount of ad revenue, and by that I mean the rate at which we earn. We're getting closer to 0.4 of a cent instead of 0.3 of a cent, and I was like, oh, why is that this month? And then when I looked at the dashboard for Spreaker and at our thing, our IAB category that was number one buying ad space was politics, political political campaigns and political agendas and parties were buying ad space. Now, I don't think this needs to be stated specifically, but I just want to make sure this is clear. We do not control the ad spaces before, during, or after episodes. If it is not coming from my mouth, or if Peter or Josie's on one of their mouths, we do not have a specific partnership with any company. So, if it's not coming from one of us directly, it just means that Spreaker assigned us that, which is just a broad way of saying we do not specifically endorse or any political candidate who runs an ad before our show. We do not specifically endorse any any political campaign or any political agenda that buys ad space before, during, or after our show. And that doesn't mean we do not have political beliefs, and I think if you listen to the show, you will know we have political beliefs. I think that does come through in the show proper, but we are not endorsing, in that way. So on that note, on with the fun of Andor, which had its 5th episode this week. Yeah, because they did 3, and then last week was 1, and then this week was 1. This is kind of the episode where we're getting together before we do the big heist. We are trying to steal the payroll of an entire sector of the Empire. And I do still think that because what happens is this thing where it's like you need to trust the people you're doing this with, otherwise, you won't be successful. Because the issue becomes, it's like, well, if I don't trust him, how do I know he's got my back? How do I know he will do what I need him to do when the time comes? And the answer is, you gotta learn to trust. So that's what this episode is all about, is learning to trust each other, learning to accept each other for who they are, and all of that cool stuff. What else was there? That's a stark realization, but that's a thing for another time. Luthen's store continues to be cool. I am a little confused about how he can just hang out with both a Jedi and a Sith holocron and not have that be an issue for him. Like, I feel like that is kind of something fundamentally that, at very minimum, Palpatine would be very interested in. If not, other entities out there who would want a holocron. I love the whole thing with Andor getting to know his team and the team slowly coming to accept Andor. It is very interesting. And it is kind of it is kind of a good way to develop and really get to know these characters. Hopefully they don't do like Solo and kill off the vast majority of them quickly, because like that could happen, and I hope that doesn't happen. And there's less Mon Mothma this week, which I think was an overall detriment to the episode. But I feel like the lack of Mon Mothma could have been better used. Like, here's the thing. We could have had Mon Mothma, we're still getting into, and her scene is kind of juxtaposed, if I remember correctly, with the blonde Imperial lady who's trying to figure out the pattern of the attacks that the rebels are using, and it's like, I am 100% in the camp that she will lead to Thrawn, because the way she's working is too methodical and too out there to not lead to Thrawn. Like, everything about her is kind of the exact same thing. Where it's like, we're looking for weird patterns, we're looking for things people ordinarily wouldn't look for. And look, she's gonna end up being right, but the Empire's not gonna believe her. And then something's gonna happen as a result, and then, Thrawn will take her under his wing. And it's like, no, she's good at what she does. I will take her, and she will help me in the 7th Fleet. And I feel like that's where this is going. I wish that... Well, no, because even if Ahsoka didn't get picked up, we would have... It's still way before Thrawn dies, quote-unquote. So I suppose it always would have been possible that Thrawn shows up. It would have been interesting. It's interesting that Thrawn is, possibly going to be here. And I'm interested to see who plays him, if anyone. I'm also interested in, do they CG like She-Hulk, or do they do like Gamora and Nebula, where it's like body paint? And I can see them doing either or. I hope it's the body paint, because I think that the CG has not been working, for She-Hulk at least. What else was there? I think that this show continues to get better and better. Like, as I'm watching it, like, this feels like prestige TV set in a science fiction universe. And I love, like, this show is the seamless blend between the aesthetic of the prequel and the aesthetic of the sequels. And it works so well, because every time we're on Coruscant, it feels like this is what the seat of government for the Empire would feel like. And it's such a great thing. I know it's probably not going to happen, but I would love to see what happened to the Jedi Temple in this time. I would love to see that. And again, there are some things that I think come from it being written by, I don't know, Tony Gilroy did write Rogue One, but I like, there are certain things where it's like, Alright, really? For me, the use of the word shit, which didn't happen in this episode, I don't think, or I didn't catch it if it did. I think use of the word shit feels, I don't want to say anachronistic, because I feel like that feels like the wrong word to use in the situation, because, he's not, what the fuck is this guy doing? It's not an anachronism, because inherently, what's it called? Inherently, Star Wars, it's not a time period, but it just doesn't fit with the universe that has been established. It feels kind of like a, what's it called? It feels kind of like a too modern a word, or too innately. It's like in one of the sequels, they said Godspeed, and I was like, the fuck? What God? You guys don't have a God specifically. I feel like that was kind of a thing where it's that wouldn't be a word they would use, because there is no, there is no, word for, there is nothing similar to that. And the same goes here, where it's in the scene with Mon Mothma in the car, it's a great scene, and it's such a, aesthetically, it's such a great scene. The problem is, he says, get on the expressway, and it's I get what you're going for. It's you don't want to have this conversation, so you're let's just get this going, and get there faster, but you're in a fucking flying car on Coruscant, and by most accounts, if I remember my prequels correctly, there are no roads to really follow. There are just places you can't go here, but beyond that, everything is kind of just, you can kind of go wherever you want. It is kind of it's just kind of one of those things. I'm the fuck, take the expressway, and it's small things like that kind of break the immersion. But beyond that, it's the show is so different looking and so different feeling that if Cassian isn't on screen or Mon Mothma isn't on screen, it feels like a really good science fiction show. And then you'll get one of these characters and you're oh shit, alright, we're in Star Wars. Or you'll hear a TIE fighter, or you'll hear a laser or something like that. And I think that's something else that really is a testament to this show's quality, is that the last 2 episodes, there's not been a ton of action, or any action really, and yet here we are, still intrigued by everything that's going on in the show, and it's still gripping my attention in a way that Book of Boba Fett really didn't. And I think that's really a testament to this show and its ability to tell this story in a unique and interesting way. I'm just really enjoying it, if I'm being completely honest. I mean, it is a strong contender for my favorite series of the year so far. I mean, assuming they can stick the landing and all of that, but it is look, I say it's a strong contender, but I think we all know Sandman's going to end up winning that for me. But yeah, I feel like this is a near perfect, a near perfect way to do a Star Wars show that feels, it really sets the bar kind of high going into the Mandalorian does and it does it well, so I'm not really concerned about that. I'm concerned more about what comes after, like Skeleton Crew and Ahsoka, really. Let's see if they can really come up with their own thing to set them apart. That's the thing now that we're seeing with Star Wars, is that the movies all, the sequel movies tried to have this kind of homogenized approach where everything is kind of designed to look kind of like what you know it to be, which is great and it works for the movies, but when it comes to the series, it's kind of we're trying to get away from that. The Mandalorian feels very distinct. It feels like a Western. Book of Boba Fett is designed to feel like a kind of a crime drama more than anything else. For better or for worse, and whether or not it works up for debate, but that. Kenobi Kenobi kind of felt like everything else too. This one feels like it's kind of trying to carve out its own thing, which may come from the fact that, you know, and I said it last week, like, Andor is a known quantity in so much as we know he's part of the rebellion, we know he's a kind of ruthless part of the rebellion, and we know that he'll do anything for the rebellion, and then we know he dies on Scarif. But what do we need to know about where he came from? And I think this is a great story because it's taking the origin of the of the rebellion and putting it through the prism of how does it relate to Andor. And I think one of the things is that I've said it before, how many times do we need to see the origin of the rebellion? And what this show is really selling me on is that the rebellion functioned because it wasn't one rebellion. There wasn't one, and it's called the Rebel Alliance, so this should have been kind of, you know, figured out. But the Rebel Alliance there are many subsections of the rebellion that all want to overthrow the Empire and reinstate the Republic. Like, they all want to do it, and they're all trying to. And the idea that there would be just one who's going to go out there and do the whole thing, it's like, oh yeah, this does make sense. That like we don't need one origin for it. There are many origins. Like, there are many stories that will dovetail into the origin of the rebellion as each of these groups come about and start their thing. Like, you know, Rebels is part of it, but then they are, like, the rebellion is already in process when they, when they show up. And it is one of those interesting kind of, it is an interesting approach to take. And I'm loving every minute of it. And I think this is, like, one of those I'm like, ooh, Andor. And as opposed to, like, everything else where there is kind of a begrudging, I will watch this because, you know, it'll give me something to talk about. But Andor, I'm like, ooh, Andor. Well, She-Hulk, too. I like She-Hulk. And not just as Daredevil's on this week. Which is what I'm here for. So, yeah, so we'll wrap up here for today. We will be back tonight with Amsterdam, the new David O. Russell movie. And then tomorrow we will have She-Hulk. And we will also have the first 3 episodes of that other show, Pennyworth, the origin of Batman's butler. Which is not a terrible show. It's not, I did my review of it, it's not awful. I was definitely expecting worse, and then when worse didn't come, I was like, alright. But, yeah, we'll talk about that this weekend. So, until then, have a great rest of your week.